Okay, so I'd like to talk about sentiment analysis, which is the automatic detection of sentiment in text. And if you've got any questions, please ask, either put your hand up or just shout out the question as we go through. So I'm very happy to take questions or criticism even as I'm going through the talk. So maybe we have discussion during the talk and then less discussion at the end, so we'll see how it works. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a program called SentiStrength, a computer program called SentiStrength, which is a free program. You can download it for free on the web. You can try it for free on the web. And it detects sentiment in text. It's mainly designed for English, but there is a German version, which I'll show you a little bit later. And it's designed for short, informal text, the kind of text that you find in a social web. So not a document from a political discussion, but maybe tweets or comments in a social network site, or maybe an informal discussion in a news website, in the comments in the news website. I don't know if that's a comment here. So the program looks inside a text to see if there's any evidence that there's sentiment in the text. And it looks separately for positive sentiment and for negative sentiment. And it's designed in a way that it doesn't assume that the language used is grammatically correct. So a lot of sentiment analysis programs start with the assumption that the grammar is perfect and that they'll be able to detect sentiment by decomposing the grammatical structure of the text. Whereas this program will accept text that is incomplete grammatically or technically wrong from a standard grammatical viewpoint. And that's quite important for social web text. So for example, we looked at comments in a big social network site and we found that 95% of them were not written in completely standard English. So standard English is really very rare in many areas of the social web. So we also look for ways of expressing sentiment that are unique to either the social web or computer-mediated communication. So for example, you're all familiar with emoticons, smileys. So the program will look for those and use those as evidence of sentiment. But also, in English, I'm not sure in German, I'm guessing it also happens in German, that people will express sentiment by adding extra letters into a word. So happy with lots of extra A's and P's and Y's means very happy. So most people reading that will think, okay, that's very happy. So this program will make the same interpretation. Extra letters in the happy make it very happy. Okay, so it looks for ways of expressing sentiment that are not standard to grammar, but are common in the social web. And it classifies each text as with a strength of positive sentiment on a scale of 1 to 5 and a strength of negative sentiment on a scale of 1 to 5. So each text will get two numbers, one for positivity and one for negativity. And so the question isn't, is the text positive or negative? But the question is how much positivity is in the text and how much negativity is in the text. And the reason for that is because the psychologists say that although we think of sentiment as being either positive or negative typically, in reality human brains process positivity and negativity to some extent separately. So you can feel a bit positive and a bit negative, or even sometimes very strongly positive and very strongly negative at the same time. And in the social web, people sometimes express positivity and negativity at the same time, even sometimes with the same words. So there are some short phrases in English that mean positive things and negative things at the same time. So in fact, there's a two-word phrase in English that's very common in the social web that is mildly positive and mildly negative at the same time. So in English, it's miss you. So two words, miss you. So why is that positive? Well, it's a positive thing to say to someone. Miss you means it's sort of a mild I love you. So it's a positive thing. But miss you also means I'm feeling bad that you're not here. So it's also a little bit negative. So it's a sentiment which is both positive and negative. So we look for positivity and negativity at the same time, and we don't assume that if a message is positive, then it's not negative, or the other way around. Okay, so how does the program work? Well, the core of the program is very simple. It's a list of almost 2,500 words or word stems that are words that are typically positive or typically negative. And each one of them has a positive or negative sentiment score, which is the average sentiment that they express when they're used in the social web. So, for example, ache in English is just a mildly negative word, so that gets a score of -2. Dislike is more strongly negative, so that gets -3. Hate is very strongly negative, that gets a -4. And excruciating is the most negative you can get in a single word, so that gets a -5 score. And similarly for positive, encourage is mildly positive, 2, coolest, moderately positive, 3, and lover, strongly positive, 4. Okay, so each word gets a score, and the lowest score is -2 or +2. We don't give a score of 1, because the number 1 or -1 means no negativity or no positivity. Okay, so we don't have a 0 in the scale. So the no positivity is 1, no negativity is -1. Okay, and the rule is the sentiment strength of a text is the highest positive number of any word in the sentence and the highest negative number of any word in the sentence. So the program looks through the words and picks out the highest positive and negative, and that's the score for the sentence. And if there are multiple sentences, it gives the highest score for any of the sentences, positive and negative. So it's a very simple rule at the core. So for example, my legs ache. The program SentiStrength will read this and say, okay, that's not a sentiment word, I'm going to skip that. Legs, not a sentiment word, I'll ignore that. Ache, that's a sentiment word, that's got a score of -2. So I'm going to give this text a score of +1 and -2. So remember, +1 means nothing in the positive dimension, and -2 means mildly negative. So this text is not positive at all, but it's mildly negative. And similarly, you are the coolest. Coolest is a moderately positive word, +3. So the text will get a score of +3, moderately positive, -1, not negative at all. Okay, and I hate Paul, but encourage him. No one called Paul here. So hate is a -4 word, encourage is a +2 word. So this sentence gets a score of moderately positive and strongly negative. Okay, so that's how the program works. It's very simple. Well, this is the core of how the program works. This does about 60% of the work of the program. And on top of this, we have a number of rules to cope with different ways of expressing sentiment. So I think we have about 16 different rules at the moment. So I'll explain some of these rules that go into improving the sentiment prediction. So first rule, we have a spelling correction algorithm, a simple program that tries to change spellings if they seem to be incorrect. We have a list of booster words like very or quite or just or extremely. And these are words that mean that the word following them, if it expresses a sentiment, is either stronger or weaker than normal. So very happy would be +4, whereas happy would be +3. Okay, so it's a modifier word, a booster word. Or if it's a word like quite happy would only be +2 instead of +3. We have a list of negating words like not, don't, won't, shouldn't. And if a negating word is before a sentiment word, then it flips the sentiment. So not happy would be negative rather than positive. A list of emoticons I mentioned before. And then we have repeated letters boost sentiment. So nice with lots of extra I's in would be the same as writing very nice. So it'd be +4 instead of +3. And the rule here is that there have to be at least 2 extra letters above what's required to spell the word. So if there's 1 extra letter, so this nice here, this doesn't get a sentiment boost. You have to have at least 2 extra letters to get the boost. And we have that rule because from testing, it seems that most people recognize that 1 extra letter is probably a spelling mistake, whereas 2 extra letters is probably a deliberate addition of letters, meaning that it's probably increasing the sentiment. And the strange rule we have with this one is that if the word doesn't contain any sentiment at all, then it becomes a moderately positive word. So the reason why we have that rule is that a lot of people will inject sentiment into an expression by adding the extra letters, even though there isn't any explicit sentiment expressed. And the most common way that's done is by writing someone's name. So the entire comment or the entire text will be one person's name, but with extra letters added into it. And so if it was a comment to me, it might be just my name, Mike, like with lots of extra I's and K's and E's. And I would interpret that as being someone positive, and it being a positive sentiment, even though there's no sentiment word used in it. So the rule we have is that we make a word positive, mildly positive, if it's neutral, but it has these extra letters in.
Could it not be that it's also negative by spelling a name in that way? I'm just not sure, because I think when I'm angry about someone, I write something like that. Mike!
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
think about comics scripts.
Yeah.
Comics and then somebody shouting like this means panic or I don't know. All kinds of sentiments can be expressed as this.
Yeah.
So there might be a little problem. I don't know how that relates to your results. Is that how common that is? But it's.
Yeah. So I agree with you. So in our tests, we find that most of the time it's positive rather than negative.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll come back later to a situation in which we allow the opposite to be the case. So we change the rules so that this is negative rather than positive.
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes this will be positive and sometimes it'll be happy, sometimes it'll be shouting. And if there's no clue in the rest of the sentence, then it's hard to decide, is it positive or negative? So we always have to have a general rule. We always use a general rule. It's always positive or it's always negative. And we have, I'll come back to later, we have a test to see whether it should always be positive or always negative. And we have a similar rule for exclamation mark. So if there's an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence and it's not positive or negative, we assume that it's a moderately positive sentiment, mildly positive sentiment, same as with the extra letters. And another rule, lots of extra punctuation at the end of a sentence, then we will boost the overall sentiment of the sentence. If it's more positive, we boost the positivity. If it's more negative, we boost the negativity. So we count this as the equivalent of very. Another strange rule is that if there's a question, then we ignore the sentiment in the question. We ignore negative sentiment in a question. So if someone says, "Do you hate me?" we don't treat that as hate, very strongly negative, but we'd say, okay, it's a question, so it's not negative. So that's quite a tricky one. Maybe "do you hate me" should be seen as just mildly negative. I don't know. And then we have an idiom list. So this is a set of phrases, short phrases, that carry a different sentiment to the sentiment of the individual words in the phrase. So the worst example in English is shock horror. So shock horror would score -5, the strongest possible negativity score in English, because it's 2 consecutive very strongly negative words. But the expression shock horror in English means I am mildly surprised. So it's like a sarcastic expression. So this gets an idiom score of -2. So we have a list of phrases like this where the phrase itself means something different from the individual words. So let's try this out. So is that text big enough? Can you see that text, or should I make it a bit bigger? Okay. Okay, well, let me just make it a tiny bit bigger. Is that a bit better? Is that big enough?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the website for the online version of the program, SentiStrength.wlv.ac.uk. So if you just Google SentiStrength, one word, you can try it out. So there's a little box where you can enter text that you want a sentiment detected in. And if you click the Detect Sentiment button, then it gives you the result. So I love you, but I hate the current political climate gets a score +3 and -4, so moderately positive and strongly negative. And underneath it explains why it got that score. So it got this score because love is a +3 word and hate is a -4 word. Okay, so it gives you the answer, and it explains why it got that answer as well. So now, your chance. So would you like me to enter some text and see what score it gets for the text? So if you like, you can try and think of an English phrase that SentiStrength will get completely wrong, and then you can make me look very stupid. No suggestions? Otherwise, I'll try this one. But please make a suggestion if you'd like me to try anything out. Yeah?
Oh, maybe if you put this event was so bad.
This event was so bad.
It was so bad.
This one.
Ooh. Oh, yeah, where's the white? Oh, thank you. Okay, so it gets a -2 for bad. So this,
Yeah.
so children speak, well, youth speak. Bad obviously means good. So well done, you beat the system. And so the system does have a problem with words that one group will use to mean a different sentiment than another group. So bad, an older person will use to mean negative, bad, whereas a young person might often use bad to mean good. So sometimes probably a young person will use bad to mean bad, and sometimes bad to mean good. So
If you write bad with 3 A's.
yeah, maybe bad with 3 A's would be good always, yeah. So we have some ways of getting around the fact that words are sometimes used to be positive, sometimes mean something positive in one context and negative in another context, by allowing the topic to be specified. So if you tell SentiStrength what the general topic is that's being discussed, then it will interpret the words that you enter in relationship to that topic. So an example here is films. So there are some words, if you're discussing a film, that will be very negative that in another context wouldn't be negative or would be only mildly negative. So if you tell the computer, I'm talking about films now, then the SentiStrength will detect the sentiment differently. So here, I left early because the film was boring. So if you're talking about a film, then this is obviously a very negative thing to say about a film. Almost the most negative thing you can say about a film was that you left early. So, whereas if you're discussing other things in general, leaving early might not be a good thing. I went to the doctor's and I left early. Maybe that's a good thing because got out quickly. So, okay, so this gets a score +1, so nothing positive in this, -5, so the most negative score possible, and it gets a score of -5 for the phrase left early. So left early is an idiomatic phrase for film reviews. So if you put left early, then you get a -5 score. And boring also gets a -4 score for a discussion of films, whereas in normal text, boring might be a -2 or a -3. But for a film, boring is very negative. And the text also says, my phone has a huge battery, so that's completely ignored because it's nothing to do with films. Okay, so we can narrow down the language a little bit. We could, you can imagine we have a youth speak version in which bad would be positive rather than negative. So we have a music version in which we have we might have bad as positive, I can't remember. So let's try this in music. So no, I've got bad as negative still in music. So this should really be positive for music, shouldn't it be bad? So we'll have to correct that. So it's got this goes to a -3 because it's -2, and then it's got the spelling emphasis, so it becomes -3. But tune is a specific word in our music lexicon meaning very good music. So tune is like a younger generation than me, a word for a very good sound, a very good pop song particularly. C-H-U-N with any number of extra U's that you like. So if we hadn't specified music, then tune wouldn't be in the dictionary. So we have some ability to cope with words used in different ways in different contexts. So shall I show you we'd like to see the German version? So this is the same program. This is going to go through the same computer code, but with a German language dictionary and a few German-specific options as well. So in the German-specific dictionary, Liebe is a +3 word, Hasse is a -4 word, and so we get this classification. So the core code underneath is the same is literally the same caller for the same computer program, but you can specify which language dictionary you want to load when the program loads. And so for this, it's just loaded the German dictionary instead of the English dictionary. So we have versions for about 12, I think, different languages at the moment. So the English version is the most tested, and the German version and the Finnish and the Spanish versions and the Dutch versions tested fairly well, and the others are not tested very much at all. The Turkish version's tested fairly well as well.
Do you have the expressions also for German?
And I don't think we have, no. So we have a few Austrian, German from Vienna slang words in there as well, because it was customized for political discussions in Austria, around Vienna, a chat room.
And are there translation changes on the scores? I mean, here the score are exactly the same as in English, but it may be that there are some words that are mildly negative in German and very negative in English, or the other way around?
Yes, so we do have those changes,
Okay.
yeah. So I haven't got a specific example, but yeah, we have changed the words, rechecked the words with a native German speaker. And one of the other changes for the way language is expressed is with negation. So in English, you would say, I am not happy, but in German, you would say, it would be more natural to say, I am happy not. Is that correct? So you'd put the word not after the word happy more often than you would put it before. You have the sentiment and then the negation word afterwards. No, I'm not seeing very many nods here. No?
We get,
Not generally, okay.
negative prepositions.
Okay,
Like un, for example. Not
okay, okay.
It's then one word in German.
It becomes
And
one
then
word,
negative
okay,
preposition.
okay.
It depends on the context. For example, I don't like something. If you say this in German, ich mag das nicht. Then
Okay.
the not at the end of the sentence, even though it refers to the I don't like something.
Okay.
I don't like
Yeah, it depends on the emphasis. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we could have dislike as kind of the German word for dislike as in the dictionary, but then like that not, we'd have not in the dictionary, but we allow the not word to occur after the sentiment word in German, but we don't allow that in English. So if you said I'm happy not in English, it would interpret it as I'm happy and ignore the not. So we have a few linguistic changes. The biggest linguistic change we have of any version is the Turkish. So in the Turkish version, you would always say happy not as one word. So you would never say in German, almost never say I'm not happy or I'm happy something not. But you would always use the single word happy not in Turkish. So in the Turkish we have a kind of a preprocessor which takes Turkish, identifies the words meaning, the words with a not at the end, and then kind of splits off the not and then feeds it into SentiStrength. So it's kind of a two-stage process. So one of the useful things about SentiStrength is that it tells you exactly where the sentiment score comes from. And if you don't like the sentiment score for any particular application, it's quite easy to change it. You can change the dictionary, which is a simple text file. So we found that when we apply SentiStrength to some specific discussions, it doesn't work very well on these specific discussions because they use words with an unusual sentiment meaning, often a lot. But that's not difficult to cope with because you can just add the word to the dictionary or change the sentiment in the dictionary. So for example, if you were using a program and the word bad kept being used, meaning good, you could just change the score for bad from -2 to +2. So there's no computer programming involved. It's the same as using a word processor to just change the input score. Okay, so it's transparent and easy to customize. Okay, so we tested SentiStrength by comparing it against the results given by humans doing the same job. So we gave humans thousands of texts to classify from different sources, from the comments on YouTube videos, comments in the social network site MySpace, a youth-oriented social network site, tweets from Twitter, sports forum comments, news discussions in dig.com, and BBC News discussions. So for each of these we took at least 1,000 comments, between 1,000 and 2,700 comments, and we gave them to 3 human coders who'd been carefully selected for giving accurate sentiment classifications, and then we compared the results of SentiStrength against the results of the human coders. And we used a simple correlation to compare the scores of the two. And except for the red text, the result was that SentiStrength agrees with the humans at about the same level that they agree with each other. So SentiStrength has human level accuracy. Even though it uses very simple rules in the main, mainly very simple rules, it has human level accuracy. And this is really a big advantage because humans are very slow at doing this job. So our human coders took on average 1 minute per text to classify them. So it really took a long time. It took months to get them to classify thousands of texts. And also we had to give them lots of breaks because it's a very boring job. So we said to them, you can only do 1 hour a day, a maximum, and then do something else for the rest of the day. Whereas the computer program, we didn't care how bored it got. We just pressed the button and let it carry on. So the computer program can classify 14,000 texts per second. So there's no competition between the computer and the human. And because they give the same level of accuracy most of the time, except for the red numbers, it means there's no advantage of using humans to classify text. So the two exceptions were the positive sentiment in the two news and political discussions. And the reason why was that in English, in news and political discussions, or in England anyway, England and America, news and political discussions, there's a lot of sarcasm. And SentiStrength didn't detect the sarcasm correctly. It kept interpreting sarcasm as being positive, even though the meaning was negative. So these are all texts from our classification set where the computer thought they were positive, but they're actually negative. So all of these use positive words to express a purely negative sentiment. And we spent 6 months trying to get SentiStrength to detect sarcasm, and we gave up because we just couldn't do it. So it's recognized as being a difficult job, detecting sarcasm. So I've only found 2 examples of computer programs that can detect sarcasm, and one is Portuguese political sarcasm can be detected by a computer program, and that's because they flag political sarcasm by changing the name of the politician they're being sarcastic about to the diminutive form in Portuguese, so you can detect it using that rule. And the other type of text is book reviews. You can detect sarcasm in book reviews because the types of sarcasm used is very limited, so they use stock types of sarcasm, so you can identify what kind of phrases they use. So the most common type of sarcasm in an English book review is, "This book has a great cover." Okay, so we gave up on the sarcasm. So if you really want to analyze political discussions and you want the highest possible level of accuracy, then you have to have some human input. If the only human input is to check the positive scores for sarcasm. But if it's not politics or narrow topics, then SentiStrength works generally very well as humans. Okay, so I'll give you some examples of applications of SentiStrength. So our literally biggest application was during the London Olympics. We were part of a project that collected tweets mentioning the Olympics all day, every day, from the start of the torch relay to the end of the disabled Olympics. And we had a big computer screen on the River Thames which showed the average sentiment on a minute-by-minute basis. So this is about an hour of sentiment. So when a big sports event was happening, you could see a big increase in sentiment or a big decrease in sentiment, depending on whether the British athlete was doing well or badly. And at 9 o'clock every night, we had a light show on the London Eye, which was driven by the amount of sentiment that was expressed in the tweets on average during the day. So this is, perhaps you can see it, this is supposed to be a pie chart on the London Eye. So this represents 70% of tweets being positive, tweets about the Olympics being positive. So this is not really anything to do with the research, it was just a fun thing, but it was really a lot of fun. We had a little exhibition inside explaining how it all worked. So this was the silliest but most fun application of SentiStrength. So I guess the most serious application we have is it's used by Yahoo in its question answering system. So if you go to Yahoo and you type a question into Yahoo and people suggest answers to your question, then Yahoo will pick the answers that it suggests to you for your question on the basis of the sentiment expressed in comments to the person that made the answer. So people that write answers that get lots of positive comments sent to them have their answers ranked more highly in Yahoo. So that's got a practical application of this in a computer system. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to go through some research type applications. So using sentiment analysis to investigate sentiment in the social web. So starting with Twitter. So this first project was an investigation of sentiment in Twitter around major media events. So for this project, we took the top 30 media events as discussed in Twitter for a month, and we analysed what happened to the sentiment in those events through SentiStrength analyses. So this was part of the project Cyber Emotions. And as part of this project, we also put people in electric chairs and strapped electrodes to their eyebrows and feet and measured how they reacted to messages, tweets or other comments from the social web and compared their body reactions with what they said they experienced and with what SentiStrength predicted the sentiment of the text they were reading or writing was. And they all correlated fairly well. So, and this was done in Universität Bremen, this part of the project. So what did we do for the media events? Well, first of all, we tried to find out what are the 30 biggest media events in Twitter for that month. And the way we did it is we collected a month of Twitter of tweets, and we identified the words in the tweets that caused the biggest spikes, the 30 biggest spikes. So this is a graph of the frequency of use of each word in Twitter with a few of the words picked out that caused the biggest spikes in the graph. So we have a program that automatically identifies spikes for all words used in all tweets. And so each of these spikes corresponds to something that suddenly happened. So, for example, one is, there's one related to the Olympics, the start of the Olympics in 2010. There's one relating to a tsunami that occurred at one stage. And some things are related to specific calendar events like Valentine's Day. So the word Valentine spiked. And some of them are memes, internet memes. So one of them is pet peeve, the hashtag pet peeve, which was an internet meme that presumably was started by a TV or a radio show, but spiked. So we picked the 30 events that weren't memes, that were genuine external real-world events, and we analysed what happened to the sentiment before the event, during the event, and after the event with SentiStrength. So for each of the 30 events, we produced a sentiment graph of the average positivity, the red line here, and negativity, the thick black line here, of the event, of tweets mentioning the keyword before and during and after the event had happened. So this was, one of the 30 keywords was Chile, for an earthquake in Chile a couple of years ago. So you can see in the volume of tweeting, it's very clear that something massive happened in Chile at this particular time, and it was tweeted about enormous amounts of the earthquake in Chile. And here you can see a big decrease in positivity in tweets mentioning Chile, and a slight increase in negativity, the black line here. So when the Chile earthquake happened, the positive tweets about Chile almost stopped, and there was a slight increase in negativity in tweets about Chile. So this was really a big surprise to me. So I expected that when a really big negative event happened, I expected a huge increase in negativity. So the maximum increase in negativity would be up to -5. That would mean every tweet was very strongly negative. Every tweet about Chile, anyway, was very strongly negative. But it didn't get up to -5. It just a very small increase. So at the start of this project, we hoped that we could detect major news events by seeing a surge in sentiment when the event started. Whereas this graph shows that that really didn't happen. There was a surge in tweets about the event, but there wasn't really a surge in negativity about the event. It was just a small increase. So it's the volume of tweeting is really the big indicator and not the sentiment. So one of the findings was that sentiment really isn't used a lot in Twitter to discuss news events, particularly to discuss news events. Even if it's a very negative event, the tweets people send are typically fairly objective. They tweet facts. This has happened, this many people died. The earthquake also affected this city. Some other fact about the Chile earthquake or another major event, but they very rarely say what they feel about the event.
Was this in English only, or?
Just in English, yeah. So we only gathered the English tweets. So do you think in another language it might have been different?
Well, when Chile speaking primarily Spanish, if I'm correct, it would have made more sense to look into these.
Yeah. So if this was in Spanish, maybe there would be more direct sentiment expressed. Yeah. So we looked at 30 events. I think this was the only one that wasn't actually in an English, that wasn't centered on an English-speaking country. So a couple were in Canada, but I think this was the only one that wasn't centered in a country that Canada's majority English-speaking. So I think the language issue only really affected this one and not the others. And we found really the same for all of them, that the typical thing that happened when a major media event occurred was that there was a small increase in negativity, sometimes a small increase in positivity, sometimes no change in positivity. But the characteristic change was a small increase in negativity.
Also for political events?
So we didn't have any major political events amongst the top 30 that I can think of. No, we didn't have political events. So I don't know for sure for political events, so it might be different.
Like, when you have, presidential campaigns or something like that, where I would expect lots of sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Politics versus sarcasm.
Yeah.
Because think about Hönes and the tax affair. So many sarcastic replies or comments on the news media, like Prof or Spiegel. Thank you.
Yeah, but earlier it didn't seem that the sarcasm wasn't talking on Twitter, only on like BBC and stuff like that.
Yes, Twitter.
Yeah, so we found that even the positive events were associated with increases in negativity rather than positivity. So this was the Oscars, and when the Oscars actually happened, you can see increase in negativity, the thick black line, and no change really in positivity, the red line.
Yeah, but I think that's associated with any sort of competitive event where you have, in the Oscars in particular, you have one person winning and four losing. So you would see the appropriate sort of proportion of negativity expressed perhaps in people supporting the losers.
Yeah. So we looked at the tweets from this, and we found some like that, but most we found that were negative were just fed up with the coverage. So So the most common type of tweet said something like, "I hate the Oscars." And one said something like, I hate the Oscars because all the televisions in my house have the Oscars on and I can't watch what I want to watch, but in much fewer words than that. So I think this was kind of a reaction to the saturated coverage, but I can't believe that there's no increase in positive tweets despite all these people, you know, on the red carpet and winning the awards and winning the prizes, but people aren't tweeting, you know, I'm so happy that so-and-so won an award, or isn't someone such a wonderful actor or actress, or isn't this film fantastic? There was just no change at all in positivity, just the people hating the Oscars, mainly. So that was very strange. But I think Twitter, about media events, about things that are actually happening at the time, Twitter's quite a factual medium. People rarely express sentiment about things that are happening at that time.
Or maybe only the people who have negative feelings need to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if this isn't partly due to the speed in which Twitter works. So maybe you want to be the first person to spread the news, or the fact that you don't really have a lot of text that you can write. You have a limit of 140 characters. So if you wanted to say, I don't know, so-and-so won the Oscars and I'm very happy about it, you might not have enough space to put the I'm very happy about it. Or you might just be used to writing short tweets and not expressing sentiment. Or you might think that everyone reading your tweet will know how you feel about it. So you tweet earthquake in Chile, maybe you assume that people reading that will know that you tweeted it because you think it's a bad thing. So they'll assume what sentiment you have. You don't have to explicitly express it. Yeah.
Can you please move the slide back?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you have 4 diagrams, 4 lines?
Oh.
Not 2.
So the thick red line is for the positive sentiment, and this is for the average of all positive tweets mentioning Chile. The thin red line is the average of all tweets mentioning Chile that contain some sentiment. So the thin red line excludes all purely objective tweets. And the green line gives the proportion of tweets that contain sentiment as a proportion of all tweets.
So I wonder what happens if you change the issue, because if you select media events, everybody wants to take part in. It's often maybe not very discursive to, or it does not polarize. You know the word?
Yeah.
So, but if you choose persons, for example, that are that can be found in such Twitter. Maybe these are popular persons or politicians or something else. So maybe you will have another effect.
Yeah, I think you could be right. So if you pick politicians' names, I think we would get more sentiment expressed.
But you did not.
We haven't done that, no. So this was just for the biggest media events.
Yeah.
Okay, so for another study, we looked at the comments on YouTube videos. So why did we look at YouTube videos? Well, we thought that the comments on YouTube videos are interesting because they're a free source of either feedback on films, videos, or discussions associated with films or videos. So YouTube has been for about 5 years now, it's been the second most viewed website in the world. So it's really a huge resource of human time and videos, and it's not very much researched. So relatively few people research YouTube, I think. But the comments are available for free, and YouTube also allow you to download the comments for free from the website, and they're easy ways of doing it. So if you're interested, I can point you to a free program that will download comments on any videos that you're interested in. So we downloaded all the comments on 35,000 videos and ran a sentiment analysis on these comments to see what kind of patterns were visible in the sentiment expressed in the video comments. So I'm sure you've all seen YouTube videos. Underneath the video, you just get a list of comments. So anyone who's watched a video can leave a comment. You just have to register with YouTube, which takes a couple of minutes. Once you're registered with YouTube, then you get a name, and then you can leave a comment. So you can register anonymously, but you do have to register. So there's a little bit of a hurdle to jump over to actually leave a comment, but once you've jumped over that hurdle, then every time you log on to YouTube, every time you open YouTube, if you're on your home computer, you can just type a comment in, so it's quite easy. So about 1 in 1,000 people that watch a video leave a comment underneath. So it's a heavily biased sample of the people that watch a video, but on the other hand, it's a free sample, and you might get insights into the video or the topic. So this is a graph of the average sentiment in all the comments from the 35,000 videos that we looked at. So you can see, sorry, this graph is a bit tricky to read. So for the positive sentiment, the average, the median sentiment was moderately positive. So the typical comment was moderately positive, getting a score of 2 or 3, mildly positive or moderately positive, 2 or 3. And the typical comment had no negativity at all. So 66% of comments had no negativity at all. They scored -1 for negativity. So this tells you that a typical YouTube comment is mildly positive and has no negativity at all. So something like, great video, I like this video. And we were interested in what kind of things in YouTube start a discussion. What kinds of videos have discussions between the participants or trigger lots of comments? What is it about a video that triggers lots of comments? So we wondered if sentiment had anything to do with the amount that people comment on a video. And first of all, we wondered if videos tend to either attract sentiment or not attract sentiment. So we did a simple statistical correlation test of the positive sentiment against the negative sentiment. So typically for a video, because the two don't correlate, they have a negative correlation, people either tend to be positive about a video or they tend to be negative about a video, not both. So a video either tends to attract positivity or negativity, not both. But interestingly, the amount of comments on a video correlates with how negative the comments are. So if you have a lot of comments, and especially if the comments are interactive in the sense that they tend to be a reply from one commenter to another, then that's associated with above average negativity. So it seems that the discussions in YouTube are about negative topics, or at least use negative language. And positivity doesn't attract discussion. So if you watch a YouTube video and you write underneath, I love this video, that's fantastic, probably there'll be no further interaction. No one will reply to that comment. But if you say, I hate this video, probably you will get a reply, or you're much more likely to get a reply. So it's the negativity that actually causes the interactions in YouTube comments. And we found that for other parts of the internet as well. For political discussions, negativity, political and news-related discussions, we found that in discussion forums, not YouTube, we found that if the initial comments in the discussion start negative, then you're much more likely to have a long engagement. So it's really the negativity that drives the discussion on the internet. So I think this is quite an interesting finding, and it means that if you're trying to design an area which generates discussion, then it's important to allow negativity to go into that area. So if you have a student forum where you want the students to discuss things with each other, you absolutely shouldn't prevent the students from being negative, even though it's kind of an instinctive thing to do if you're in education. You want to stop negativity. If you stop negativity in any kind of internet discussion, it's likely that you'll also stop interactions. So a little bit of negativity helps the interactions.
It's also a question or a matter of whether you want to have interaction for interaction's sake, or you want to have sort of productive interaction. That's what lots of sites are employing to sort of limit these discussions, because they lead usually to nowhere.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good point. So you can have interactions that you don't want. So we haven't looked into that. Sorry, yeah.
In YouTube, there's also a special culture because those videos, music videos, they are always, most of them, visited by fans of the videos, and there's always those kind of jokes like, oh, 17 people dislike the movie, they must have misclicked or something.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, this negative interaction is like if someone doesn't like the video, there could become this like, so why do you watch it? Why are you here? Just go away, and other things that likely escalate into a shitstorm or something.
Mm.
So I think this is special about YouTube because it's not about you discussing, it's more about celebrating the video, and if someone's not doing the same, people get replies.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Yeah, we found that very few music videos attracted these intense discussions. It tended to be videos on more controversial topics. So the least discussed topic seemed to be old pop music. So I guess if it's an old pop music video you're watching, you're almost certainly there because you remember it from 20 years ago, speaking for myself, 30 years ago. And the other people watching it will also be people who remembered it from 20, 30 years ago. So they're not going to say anything bad about it.
So what type of videos were most discussed?
Well, we looked at the most common topics for intensely discussed videos, and religion came up a lot. So all sorts of different religions, but big, intense religious discussions.
Negative or positive?
Negative, yeah. So there was only one music video which was in our set of the top most discussed videos, and that was a black metal video, and there was a huge discussion in the comments on the video about whether black metal was better than death metal.
And was this discussion mainly negative?
Yes. Yeah, there were a lot of people who were completely convinced that black metal was absolutely awful and death metal was the best, and the other way around as well. And they were quite sarcastic about it, but in a very negative, sarcastic way. Okay, so a network thing that you can do with YouTube, with a free program, is you can take the comments on the video, on a video, and you can turn it into a network where the nodes in the network are the people who made the comments, and the arrows between the nodes are who replied to whose comment. So in this diagram, every dot is a person that made a comment on the video Law Library Part 3, rap video, and a black line from one person to another means that they've made comments, and they're mainly negative comments. So an arrow means this person has made mainly negative comments on this person's comments. So most of the lines are black for negative comments, but this person made a positive comment on that person's comment. So you can turn an individual video into a network diagram of the people that interact through the comments on the video. And this is quite easy to do. So there's a free program to do it, and once you've downloaded the program, it takes actually it takes a little bit of time. Probably takes 15 minutes to build the network, but you just press the button and then wait for it to get the data, and then it draws a network for you. So you don't have to put much of your own time in, except for downloading the program and finding the button to click. It's a webometric analyst.
Is it in any way related to SentiStrength, or how is it?
Yeah.
The ones that have the reply, negative reply.
So the colours, the black and the red, are coloured by SentiStrength.
So is this typical for YouTube discussions, to have like kind of isolated discussions?
Yes. Yeah, so most discussions, there aren't intense interactions. It's like a few, like a person will come along and maybe reply to a couple of others, and then someone else will reply to them, and then neither of them come back later to carry on, so quite isolated. So the exception to that is Justin Bieber. So this was the network for one of Justin Bieber's videos, and there were people leaving huge, so the size of the circle, yeah. So the size of the circle is proportional to the number of comments a person makes. So there are people leaving huge numbers of comments on this video. This is actually color-coded for gender. So for this video, it was mostly females commenting, but mostly males leaving lots of comments on the video. So So Justin Bieber he's an exception for pop music, I think, because I think a lot of young teenage boys just go to the video to engage in Justin Bieber hatred and to annoy his typical fan base. So I'll just mention one final topic. So we've tried to apply SentiStrength to political discussions and to discussions around specific topics for specific projects. So we were part of a project to investigate the UK riots of a year and a half ago, I guess. So we investigated how they were discussed in Twitter. And when we first applied SentiStrength, it didn't work very well because the discussions of the riots used a lot of words that weren't in SentiStrength, and they were the kind of the key sentiment words. So we had to develop a method to adapt SentiStrength to the new context. So this method is designed to cope with the fact that there might be new sentiment words occurring, or there might be new uses for old sentiment words, or there might be other things. There might be things that make our normal rules for sentiment strength detection not work very well. So, for example, pistol was one of our negative words, but for the Olympics, pistol wasn't a negative word because it tended to be used in the phrase starter pistol. So that's not negative. No one's getting shot when the starter pistol goes off. And flame was negative for the Olympics, and nothing's burning with a flame. Nothing you want to keep going is burning. And with the Olympics, fire and flame were very negative. Sorry, with the riots in the UK, fire and flame were very negative because it was houses or shops burning.
It's just touching now because are those words figuring in your first list of sentiment words that you're using for the SentiStrength too? Because pistol and flame, for me, that's something neutral. I mean, there's no sentiment to a pistol. For a soldier, a pistol is a tool, and
Yeah.
for something with bank robbery. Yeah, but, I mean, so there's not a sentiment term, not a sentiment word, or emotion term. I rather suspected emotion terms in your list.
Yeah, most of them are emotion terms, but we do have some terms that are not emotion terms, but are strongly associated with emotion or sentiment. So pistol was a word that's in the social web, in the general social web, if the word pistol's used, it's generally in a negative context. So we have it as a, sorry? Yeah, Sex Pistols is an exception, yeah. Yeah.
So I really doubt that this kind of works, because it's not, it's a neutral thing. You cannot, it depends on the context very heavily.
Yeah. So we have, in the dictionary we have mainly words that directly express sentiment, like happy or sad, but we also have words that don't directly express sentiment, but are used typically in a negative context or typically in a positive context. And the reason why we have that is because if we took out those words, then we would detect less sentiment. So what the words allow us to do is detect sentiment in context when it's not quite explicit, but it's still there. But as you pointed out, it will sometimes give us the wrong answer. So the words that stay in the dictionary are the ones that more often give us the right answer than the wrong answer on the text that we've tested. So kind of a balancing act.
There are lots of emotion terms in languages. The problem is that probably all these emotion terms do not appear in the text, in these Twitter texts and YouTube comments that you were analyzing.
Yeah.
This is rather high-level language.
Yeah.
So very nuanced terms of emotions are available in all languages, and very difficult to translate as well.
Yeah.
But those don't figure in your sample problem. I guess.
Yeah.
Another thing came to my mind. You're always using the most positive and the most negative word you find in a text, right? So the longer the texts are you analyze, the more you kind of take the edge off.
Yes. That's true. So
analyze a whole book, you'll probably always get -5, +5.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. So the method doesn't work well for very long texts. So we expected for this reason that the performance would degrade. The longer the text is, the worse the accuracy is. But it hasn't really done that for the text that we've analysed. The longest text that we analyse on average are the BBC forum posts, but their accuracy isn't significantly different from the rest. But this won't work at all for books or essays. But we have a version for books or essays where instead of having the stronger sentiment expressed, you take the average sentiment expressed. So it's like an option for SentiStrength. But I don't think it'll work very well. So it's really designed for short texts like that you typically find in the social web rather than documents, full documents. Okay, so the methods that we've got for adapting SentiStrength to particular sets of text around a specific issue. The first method we have is mood. So you can give SentiStrength a mood, either positive or negative. So the default mood is positive, so generally the social web is a positive place. But you can set the mood to be negative. And if you set the mood to be negative, what that means is if SentiStrength detects that there's sentiment in a sentence, but there's no clue about whether the sentence is positive or negative, then it'll assume it's negative if the mood is negative, and it'll assume it's positive if the mood is positive. So, for example, Mike with the extra eyes would be positive normally, but if you set the mood to be negative, then this will be interpreted as negative. So this will be shouting Mike if you set the mood to be negative. Okay, so there are a few of the sentiment rules that assume the sentiment is positive, unless you set the mood to negative, and then it's assumed to be negative. So we set the mood to be positive for the Olympics because that worked best, and negative for the riots because that worked best for the riots. Okay, I won't bore you with the statistics, but the statistics show that it makes quite a big difference if we're analysing a negative topic. Setting the mood to negative significantly improves the results. And the second thing we have is an automatic method of identifying words that should be added to the dictionary or words that should have their sentiment score changed for a particular set of texts. So this is the generation of issue-specific words. So we have a part of the program that will process lots of text and look for words that seem to have the wrong scores. And then it gives the human a list of words that seem to have the wrong scores. And then the human is the final arbiter to say, yes, this word has the wrong score, we have to change it, or no, it doesn't have the wrong score. So we have to have a human input stage to this because some of the words it gets wrong, essentially. So can you see that? So this is the words that were added to the riots list. So we added the words arrest, arrested, baton, batoned, hashtag Birmingham riots, brainwashing and caught. So all of these words were typically used in a negative context in terms of the riots, whereas some of the words, some of these words are probably negative anyway. So arrest and arrested, they're pretty negative words. So we could probably have those in the permanent dictionary, but caught, we couldn't add to the permanent dictionary. So in a general context, caught could be positive or negative. But if you talk about riots, caught is probably a negative thing because it means someone being caught. Caught meaning is then going to prison. So it's a negative thing. And then some words are specific to the riots, like the hashtag Birmingham riots.
What about the particular opinion of some people who don't like the riots, who disagree with the riots, that finally those people got caught? This would be positive.
Yeah. Yeah. So if this word had turned out to be a positive word, then that would have also made sense for exactly the reason you've given. But the computer predicted it as being a negative word because, so the rule is if a word occurs in texts that are typically not classified as negative, even though they are negative, then it looks for words that might express sentiment in the text. So on average, the word caught was used in sentences that were interpreted by the human coders as negative and neutral by the computer. So the word caught was probably used in a negative context overall. So we had that problem occur again we did a similar analysis for tweets about the alternative vote referendum that we had a couple of years ago in the UK. And then we found that there was a significant bias in the human coders. I think all our human coders were for proportional representation, in favour of the alternative vote system because our human coders gave vote yes a positive code and vote no a negative code. So completely biased. So there's an element of subjectivity in this. So this was the alternative vote lexicon. So you can see, again, some of these words are clearly sentiment words, like fairer, that's obviously a positive word. And some are just rare negative words that were used a lot in the alternative vote. So fear-mongering, fearmongers. I mean, it's an English word, it's just a really rare word, but it was used a lot in the context of alternative votes, tweets. So the computer picked it up as a significant term for the tweets. Okay, so if we want to have the best possible accuracy for sentiment detection for a narrow corpus, then we have to do a little bit of extra work to make sure that it's not making mistakes due to commonly occurring words that it interprets incorrectly. So with the combination of the mood and the issue words, we got sentiment analysis up to about a human level classification, even on these narrowly focused topics. So the one problem that we really haven't solved is sarcasm detection. So discussions with a lot of sarcasm, SentiStrength can't handle. But for the other topics, SentiStrength should be able to handle them as it is, unless it's narrowly focused and uses specific sentiment words in an unusual way. And then the extra work needs to be done to improve the scoring of SentiStrength through the mood and the additional words to add to the lexicon. Okay, so just to sum up, so sentiment analysis now is possible. Automatic sentiment analysis is possible. It has about human level accuracy, except in some cases, and you can apply it to analyze lots of texts very quickly. So the tweet analysis we did was 2.7 million tweets analyzed in an hour with SentiStrength. So we can really analyze huge quantities of texts very quickly with automatic sentiment analysis programs, and that allows us to ask questions that we couldn't ask before, simply because we didn't have time to look at enough data, enough texts to ask those questions. And now we can with sentiment analysis. Okay, so thank you very much. Questions?